I really thought Mom had a lot of money saved up. I mentioned it before, right? It's time to kick her out. Why keep a jobless person here? I've been living here for 3 months, and my son and his wife used up all my savings. They treated me badly. I had enough, so I left quietly. Then, my son called me. Mom, what's happening? Tony sounded worried on the phone. Around that time, something I did became big news across the United States. I'm Sarah, and I'm 70 years old. I lived in France for a while, but I got sick, so I came back to the States. My old apartment was gone, so I asked my son and his wife if I could stay with them for a bit. Tony, my only son, is 44 and works in an office. He and his wife, Alice, don't have kids, and they live quietly. We lost touch while I was away, but I decided to reconnect, and Tony seemed happy to hear from me. I explained my situation and asked if I could stay for a while. Tony agreed, though he seemed unsure. It felt awkward to rely on them, but the happiness of being with family again outweighed my doubts. With a mix of nerves and happiness, I took a taxi from the airport to their house. When I got there, Tony and Alice greeted me at the door. Tony seemed glad to see me, but Alice looked upset. I plan to stay here for a few months. My stuff will arrive later, I said, leaving my carry-on bag and heading to the living room. We talked about our lives, jobs, and my time in France. When Tony asked why I moved there, I just said, I wanted to enjoy the French countryside as I get older. Tony laughed, but Alice stayed unhappy. We also talked about my health issues. I've been dizzy a lot, and might have Meniere's disease. Sometimes I can't stand and feel sick when it happens. I don't feel safe living alone, so I want to stay with them until I feel better. After our chat, I went to get my stuff for my carry-on. As I organized it in the hallway, I heard Tony and Alice talking. Are you serious about letting Sarah stay? I don't want to live with an old woman. She's my mom, Alice said. You're not always home because you work part-time, Tony replied. But what about when we're off work? How long is she staying? I want her gone. Alice insisted. Mom will leave eventually. Let's talk about money tomorrow. Just keep it down, she might hear you, Tony warned. She can't hear us, she's old. Old age brings sharp ears for insults, Alice said. There I was hearing their conversation in the hallway. I felt bad for suddenly staying with Tony and his wife. It must be hard for them, but I'm happy to spend time with them after so long. When Tony was young, I raised him alone after my husband died. We didn't have much, and Tony faced difficulties with his health. This doesn't make up for that, but I came here to apologize and show gratitude. It's a shame I'm not welcome, but they have their own lives. I went to the guest room they gave me, trying to calm my anxious heart. The next morning, Tony went to work, leaving just Alice and me at home. While I was doing some crafting in the living room, Alice came up to me. Hey Sarah, can you clean up this mess? I looked around and saw fabric scraps and threads scattered about. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll clean it up. Do you want to see what I'm making? I showed her the small pouch I was sewing, with a little green turtle design. It's a turtle pouch. I love turtles, so I make crafts with turtle themes. It even has a zipper on its shell, I explained. That's nice, Sarah, but you can't stay here all day. Find somewhere else to go when I'm not working. You're in the way, Alice said, cutting me off, clearly uninterested. But I get dizzy if I go outside too much, I protested. I'll drive you to the nearby community center to stay during the day. I have things to do at home, Alice said firmly, without room for discussion. She added, and while you're here, help with the chores. You're not just here to relax. Since we're letting you stay, do some cleaning and laundry instead of crafting. Stunned, I finally replied, okay, and slowly got up from the armchair. Despite feeling dizzy and sore, I ended up doing all the housework. Alice and Tony treated me like a housekeeper, and it seemed like Alice hadn't been keeping up with chores before I arrived. That night, when Tony got home, he asked, Mom, did you bring your banking card? He spoke with a smile. I don't mind you living with us, but life costs money. Could you chip in? I looked at Tony, nodded, and stood up. I took out my banking card from my handmade pouch and handed it to him. He checked it quickly, and his face tightened. Wait, Mom, is this all you have saved? Any other accounts? I replied. That's all I have. I don't need much at my age. No chronic illnesses or anything. I smiled as the conversation continued, but Tony's expression darkened. This isn't enough money, not even $10,000. You said you were living well abroad, so I assumed. Tony kept pressing me, asking if I had more money. When I said no, he sighed and slumped his shoulders. Okay, I'll hold on to this cash for now. I'm doing you a favor by letting you live here, so this is the least you could do. After getting my account password, Tony took my bank and debit cards and left the room. That night, lying in bed, I could hear Tony muttering through the wall that separated our rooms. This is disappointing. I thought Mom was wealthy. Our household is actually struggling financially. We shouldn't have let her stay. We gain nothing from having her here. They sounded confident, talking openly in the next room. Maybe they wanted me to hear them. In my cold bed, I fought back tears of loneliness and sadness. The next day, since Alice had a day off, she drove me to the local community center. When I opened my bag to continue my crafting, I realized I forgot the fabric I needed at home. I hesitated to ask Alice to go back and get it. Luckily, my dizziness wasn't too bad that day, so I decided to walk home to fetch it since I knew the area well. As I approached the house, I glanced through the window and saw Alice with a man I didn't recognize. They seemed very close, and I hesitated outside for a moment before deciding not to interrupt them. It dawned on me that maybe they wanted me out so I wouldn't interfere with whatever was going on between them. Back at the community center, thoughts of Alice and the man kept swirling in my mind, so I decided to call someone for advice. From then on, I avoided bringing up the situation and continued interacting with Tony and his wife as usual. However, whenever I left the house, I made sure to leave a red turtle pouch conspicuously on the living room side table. 3 months had gone by since I moved in with Tony's family. By then, I had essentially become the household's maid. When I was home, I had to do endless chores, and when Alice was around, I was sent off to the community center. Most of my savings had been drained by Tony, who had a gambling addiction. He spent most of his free time on lotteries and slots, likely stemming from financial hardships he faced as a child. At first, I tried to talk to him about it, but it always ended in anger. After enduring 3 months of hardship, I reached my breaking point. One night before a long weekend, I decided to address something I've been pondering. Tony, Alice, I want to thank you for letting me stay with you. Tony, I know I caused difficulties for you when you were young due to our financial situation. I apologize for any trouble I caused, but I'm grateful. I presented a homemade turtle pouch from the table. It was green with a zipper on the shell. This is a token of my appreciation to both of you. I hope you'll accept it. To my surprise, neither Tony nor Alice showed any interest in my handmade gift. Mom, enough of that. Can't we access some funds from your French account or something? Tony suggested. I already told you, there's no more money. Look, I put a lot of effort into making this. Can't you accept it as a gesture of love? Remember how happy you used to be when I filled the shell with candy and a bit of pocket money? Tony's irritation grew. I'm not a child anymore. I don't find joy in receiving something like this, Sarah. How much longer do you plan to depend on us? Frankly, it's irritating. Tony and his wife exchanged a cold look, appearing desperate. I asked Tony, do you remember Joe? He helped us out in that old apartment we lived in. What? I don't remember. Stop bringing up old stories, Tony replied sharply. A heavy silence settled between us as I held onto the turtle pouch tightly, feeling the paper inside. The next day, Tony and his wife went on vacation, leaving me behind. After our conversation the previous night, I had already planned to leave the house. I quickly packed my bags with the arranged carrier and sent them off to my home in France. I made sure to include the red turtle pouch in my carry-on bag. Leaving a brief note of gratitude and farewell on the table, I walked out of the house where I had stayed for 3 months. After leaving the house, I didn't immediately return home. Instead, I stayed in a hotel in the US for a while. I had matters to attend to, and I figured Tony and his wife would reach out to me eventually. True to my expectations, about 2 weeks later, Tony called. Mom, what's the deal with the turtle pouch? It's yours, right? Tony's voice sounded frantic over the phone. Oh, you noticed? I replied calmly. I wasn't surprised when I saw the news on TV about the turtle-shaped pouch. Inside it was a check for $1 million. It was my way of expressing gratitude for all they'd done and apologizing for any trouble I caused them when Tony was young. Some might think it shallow to make amends with money, but I had dreamed of this day for over 40 years, saving up bit by bit. Before meeting Tony after so long, I did some research and discovered he was in debt. He had tried to clear his gambling debts by gambling more, only to sink deeper. Despite having a steady job, he couldn't break free from the cycle. I simply wanted him to pay off his debts and find peace. However, they refused my gesture, forgetting the kindness they had once shown my family. So I decided to split the $1 million check into smaller amounts and donate it to charities and welfare organizations across America. I placed the donations in a handmade turtle pouch and sent them anonymously. The turtle pouch became a sensation, making headlines and trending on social media. "Alice, isn't that the turtle pouch?" someone commented online. "Yeah, looks like it," another remarked. "Yes, that's the one. I was planning to give them filled with money too," I replied. "I see. Well, you could have just told us. We would have accepted it. If you didn't want my feelings, then you don't need my money either." Tony's voice was angry over the phone. "It's my money. How dare you deceive me? Give it back," he demanded. I couldn't bear to listen to Tony's anger any longer, so I pulled the phone away from my ear. After a moment, I spoke. "All right, calm down. You're giving me a headache. There's one more turtle. And if you really want it, it's yours." Tony eventually settled down and insisted on having the turtle. We agreed to meet later at a cafe. On the appointed day, I brought the last red turtle in an envelope to our meeting spot. Tony and his wife were already there, demanding the money before I even sat down. When I silently pulled out the red turtle, Tony snatched it immediately, unzipping its shell. But instead of finding a check, he found a small electronic device. "What the heck is this?" Tony was confused. He found a tiny button and pressed it. A voice started playing, and Alice, standing next to Tony, turned pale. Seated next to Tony, Alice's expression changed as she heard a voice recording. It was her own, speaking warmly with another man who wasn't Tony. "What is this? Why? What's happening?" Alice seemed to finally understand that it was a recording of her having an affair at home. She tried to grab the recorder from Tony's hand, but he held on tight. While they struggled, I opened the envelope. I brought out several pictures and laid them on the table, showing Alice cheating with another man at home. Faced with undeniable evidence, Alice was flustered and kept asking, "Why? Why?" Tony picked up the photos one by one, studying them closely. "Something didn't feel right since I arrived at your house. A friend suggested I hire someone to find out, and even offered to cover the costs." "Why would you do this? What's wrong with you?" Alice's voice trembled. "Well, you're my son's wife. It's heartbreaking to think family would deceive each other. Maybe you'll understand when you're older. Fate brought me here to uncover your infidelity, Alice. Have you been lying to me this whole time?" Tony's disappointment was evident in his voice. "Tony, when did this start? You have secrets too. If you're saying she cheated, you need to admit your mistakes," Alice argued. "I never cheated, but what about the money you owe?" Tony went quiet, and Alice took her turn to speak. "What about you spending all your money on gambling? I only use the money I earn, and you have a part-time job, so you should have some savings," Alice replied. As I listened to their argument, it was obvious this couple had been holding on somehow until now. "Both of you are broke. Tony, you owe $40,000. Alice, you've been giving all your earnings to your other person." "I had someone check your finances too," I'd interrupted. Both Tony and Alice were really surprised, and they started yelling at each other. I was stunned when I found out about the investigation results. This couple was really close to running out of money. "Listen, if we get Mom's money, we can pay off the debt, so just give it to us already," Tony insisted. "I already gave away all the money. The only thing left is this red turtle statue," I clarified. "He spent all my savings on gambling, remember?" Tony accused Alice. "What? No way. All of it?" Alice's eyes widened in shock. In a fit of anger, Tony lunged at me across the table. Other people in the cafe started paying attention, and the staff rushed over. "The $1 million was supposed to be mine." "It's mine. Give it back," Tony shouted. Soon, the police had to be called to calm Tony down. After they talked to him, they kindly escorted me back to my hotel because I was worried about Tony's aggressive behavior. A week later, Tony and Alice's relationship had fallen apart completely because of the affair and money problems. They got divorced. Tony, now single, got even more caught up in gambling and debt. He was caught trying to steal money from his job and was fired. To make things worse, His angry outburst in the cafe was recorded and shared on social media, making it hard for him to find another job. Unable to face the embarrassment, Tony cut off all contact and disappeared. After the divorce, Alice didn't have anyone to depend on, so she moved into an old public housing unit and lived alone. Just as I was about to make a donation to help rescue turtles, a post I made online joking about my own turtle went viral. Alice started experiencing harassment and stalking because of it, which eventually spread to her part-time job and got her fired. Even the man she was having an affair with got tired of her and left. Now she doesn't have any income and is relying on temporary assistance for needy families. After that, I went back to my home in France. Once I finished unpacking in my apartment, I changed into a dress smoothly. While I was going over some work documents, I heard a noise at the door. It seemed Joe, my roommate, had come back home. "Hey, Madam President. Welcome back. How was your trip to America?" Joe greeted me with a smile as he hung up his coat and put down his bags. "Hey Joe, I'm back, and look. I brought back so many souvenirs," I said excitedly. "Wow, all my favorites. Thanks. I'll bring some to the storytelling event at the community center tomorrow," Joe said happily. Joe carefully examined each souvenir on the table, his face glowing with delight. After we both got back on our feet, Joe and his wife moved away for work. Years later, we unexpectedly met in the city, and I started helping with a support program for people in need that Joe had started. By then, Joe's wife had passed away, and we began working together as partners in both business and life. I've been leading the organization since Joe retired a few years ago. What began as a small initiative by Joe and his late wife has grown into a large international organization over the past 30 years. Currently, our focus is on helping single moms raise their children. A few years ago, we moved to France to study their advanced support systems. While we've become well known in France, we're still not widely recognized in America. I plan to expand our activities there soon and wanted to spend some time with Tony and his family just as a mother before they found out about my work. In the end, I couldn't get them to understand how I felt. But that's their decision. Even though it was brief, I was happy to spend time together as a family. Now at 70 years old, I believe age is just a number. There's still so much I want and need to accomplish. I straightened my back in my dress and began pondering my upcoming international speech for tomorrow.
I thought Mom had lots of money saved, but turns out she didn't. I told you, right? I think we should make her leave. Why keep someone who doesn't have a job here? I've been living here for 3 months, and my son and his wife used up all my money. They treated me like I was just here to clean up after them. I got tired of it all, so I left quietly. Then my son called me, sounding really worried. "Mom, what's happening?" Tommy asked urgently on the phone. Right around that time, something I did became big news all over the United States. My name is Sarah, and I'm 70 years old. I lived in France for a while, but then I got sick and had to come back to the United States. My old apartment was gone, so I asked my son Tommy and his wife if I could stay with them for a bit. Tommy is my only son, and he's 44 years old, working in an office. He and his wife Alice don't have any kids, and they seem to live quietly. We lost touch while I was away, but I decided to reconnect, and Tommy seemed happy to hear from me. I explained my situation and asked if I could stay for a bit. Tommy reluctantly said yes. It felt awkward to ask, but the joy of being with my family again made me brave. Feeling a bit nervous but mostly happy, I took a taxi from the airport to their house. When I got there, Tony and Alice greeted me at the door. Tommy seemed glad to see me, but Alice didn't look happy at all. "I'm planning to stay here for a few months. My stuff will arrive later," I told them. I left my small bag and went to the living room. We talked about our lives, jobs, and my time in France. When Tommy asked why I moved to France, I just said, "I'm getting old and wanted to enjoy living in the countryside there." Tommy chuckled, but Alice still seemed unhappy. Then we talked about my health issues. I've been feeling really dizzy and the doctors think it might be Meniere's disease. When it happens, everything seems to spin around me and I feel sick. I don't feel safe living alone, so I wanted to stay with them until I feel better. After our chat, I went back to the entrance to grab my things from my bag. As I was sorting out my stuff in the hallway, I heard Tony and Alice talking. "Tommy, are you really okay with Mom staying here?" "I don't want to live with an old lady," Alice said. "She's my mom, come on." Plus, you work part-time, so it's not like you'll always be here, Tony replied. Yeah. But what about her days off? How long is she going to stay? I want her gone, Alice insisted. Don't say that. Mom will leave eventually. Let's talk about money tomorrow. Just keep your voice down. She might hear you, Tony warned. She can't hear us. She's old. They say old age brings sharp ears for insults, Alice remarked. And there I was, listening to their talk in the chilly hallway. I feel bad for suddenly intruding on Tony and Alice's lives. I'm sure it's a big hassle for them. But I'm really happy to be spending time with them after all these years apart. When Tony was young, I raised him alone after my husband passed away. We didn't have much, and Tony faced his own struggles with sickness and all. This doesn't make up for that, but I wanted to come here to share my apologies and gratitude. That's why I came to this house. It's a shame I'm not welcomed, but they have their own lives to lead. I went to the guest room they gave me, trying to calm my anxious heart. The next morning, Tony left for work, leaving just Alice and me. While I was doing some crafting in the living room, Alice came up to me. Hey Sarah, can you not make such a mess? I glanced around and saw fabric bits and threads everywhere. Oh sorry, I'll tidy up. Do you know what this is? I showed her the little pouch I was sewing with a cute turtle design. This is a turtle pouch. I love turtles, so I make crafts with them. It even has a zipper on its shell, I explained. That's nice, but Sarah, you can't just hang around here all day. Alice interrupted, clearly uninterested. At least go somewhere else when I'm not working. You're getting in the way. But I get dizzy if I go out too much, I said. I'll drag you to the community center nearby. You can stay there during the day. I have things to do at home, Alice said firmly, without room for discussion. And also help with the chores while you're here. You're not just here to relax. It's the least you can do since we're letting you stay, she added, leaving me surprised. So I finally said, okay, and got up slowly. From then on, I found myself doing all the housework, even though I felt dizzy and achy. I took on the chores that Alice and Tommy seemed to expect me to do, almost like I was their housekeeper. I noticed that Alice was always glued to her phone, maybe neglecting the housework before I arrived. That evening, when Tommy came home, he approached me with a smile and asked, Mom, did you bring your bank card? I looked at him over my reading glasses, nodded, and got up. I took out my bank card from the little pouch I made and handed it to Tommy. He quickly checked it, and his expression changed. Wait, Mom, is this all the money you have saved? Do you have any other accounts? He asked, his face tightening. That's all I have. I don't need much at my age, and I don't have any health problems, I said, smiling. But as the conversation went on, Tommy's expression grew darker. Wow, this isn't much money at all, not even $10,000. You said you were living well abroad, so I assumed. Tommy kept questioning me, asking if I had more money hidden away. When I said no, he sighed and seemed disappointed. Fine, I'll keep hold of this card for now. I'm doing you a favor by letting you stay here, so this is the least you can do. After Tony got my account details, he took my bank and debit cards and left the room. That night, as I lay in bed, I could hear Tony sighing loudly through the wall that separated our rooms. Oh, what a disappointment. I thought Mom had a lot of money. But it turns out our finances are in bad shape because of her. I shouldn't have agreed to let her stay. We should kick her out. She's not bringing us any benefits, Tony complained. It seemed like both of them were pretty sure of themselves. They talked openly in the next room, almost as if they wanted me to hear. In my cold bed, I held back tears of loneliness and sadness. The next day, since Alice had the day off, she drove me to the local community center. I opened my bag to continue my crafting in the lounge area, but realized I had forgotten the fabric I needed at home. I hesitated but couldn't bring myself to ask Alice to go back and get it. Luckily, I wasn't feeling too dizzy that day. I knew the area, so I decided to take a walk back home to get the fabric. When I finally reached home, I peeked through the window and saw Alice with a man I didn't recognize. At first, I thought he might be a guest, but they seemed really close. I hesitated outside for a moment, then decided not to go in. It dawned on me that maybe they wanted me out so I wouldn't interrupt their affair. Back at the community center, I couldn't stop thinking about Alice and the man. I decided to call someone for advice. From then on, I avoided mentioning the situation and continued interacting with Tony and his wife. But whenever I left the house, I made sure to leave a red turtle pouch on the living room side table, just to let them know I was aware of what was going on. 3 months went by like this. I had been staying with Tony's family for a while now, essentially becoming their household maid. Whenever I was at home, I had to do endless chores. And when Alice was around, I was sent off to the community center. Most of my savings had been drained by Tommy, who had a gambling addiction and spent a lot of his time on lotteries and slot machines. His obsession with money seemed to stem from the financial struggles he faced as a child. I tried to talk to him about it at first, but it always made him angry. After 3 months of this, I couldn't take it anymore. One night before a long weekend, I decided to do something I had been thinking about. Tommy, Alice, I want to thank you for letting me stay with you. Tommy, I know things were tough for you when you were young because we didn't have much money. I'm sorry for all the trouble I've caused, but I'm grateful. I took out a homemade turtle pouch from the table. It was green with a zipper on the shell. This is a token of my appreciation for both of you. I hope you'll accept it. To my surprise, neither Tony nor Alice showed any interest in my handmade gift. Mom, that's enough. Are we really out of money? Can't you think of some French account or something? Tony said. I've told you, we're out of money. Look, I put a lot of effort into making this. Can't you just accept it as a symbol of my love? Remember how happy you used to be when I would fill the shell with candy and a little pocket money? Tommy started getting more and more irritated. I'm not a kid anymore. I don't want something like this. Sarah, how much longer do you plan on depending on us? It's getting annoying, Tommy continued. Both Tony and his wife gave me a cold look. Desperate. I tried to remind Tommy. Do you remember Joe? He helped us out in our old apartment. What? I don't remember. Stop bringing up old stories. Are we done? Shocked into silence, I held onto the turtle pouch tightly, feeling the texture of the paper inside. The next day, Tony and his wife went on vacation, leaving me behind. After our conversation the night before, I had decided it was time for me to leave as well. So I quickly packed my bag with the help of an arranged carrier and sent it off to my home in France. I made sure to include the red turtle pouch in my carry-on bag. Before leaving, I left a simple note on the table thanking them and saying goodbye, and then I left the house where I had been staying for 3 months. Instead of going straight home to France, I stayed in a hotel in the US for a while. I had things to take care of, and I figured Tony and his wife would contact me eventually. Sure enough, about 2 weeks later, Tony called me. Mom, what's going on? That turtle pouch, it's yours, right? I could hear Tony's frustration over the phone. Ah, you noticed. I wasn't surprised when I saw the news on TV. Inside the turtle-shaped pouch that I had planned to give to Tommy and his wife was a check for $1 million. It was my way of thanking them for all they had done for me and apologizing for any trouble I may have caused them in the past. Some people might think it's shallow to make amends with money, but I had been dreaming of the day when I could give it to them, saving up bit by bit over the course of 40 years. Before meeting Tony after a long time, I did some investigating and discovered that he was in debt. He had tried to pay off his gambling debts by gambling even more, only to find himself in even deeper trouble. Despite having a steady job, he was struggling. All I wanted was for him to clear his debts and leave peacefully, but when I offered to help, they refused to accept my gesture. It seemed like they had completely forgotten about the kindness they had shown to my family and me in the past. So I decided to divide the $1 million check into smaller sums and donate them to charities and welfare organizations across America. I put the donations in the same handmade turtle pouch and sent them anonymously. The turtle pouch became a sensation, making headlines and trending on social media. On social media, Alice's son commented, "Hey mom, isn't that the turtle pouch?" "Yeah, mate. So does that mean you were going to give us one filled with money too?" "Yes, exactly. That was my way of saying thank you and I'm sorry. I've been making both the pouch and saving the money to give to you." "Well, you could have told us. We would have accepted it. If you didn't want my feelings, then you don't need my money either." Tony's voice was filled with rage as he yelled on the phone, completely losing control. "That money belongs to me. How dare you trick me? Give it back." I couldn't bear to listen any longer, so I pulled the phone away from my ear. After a moment, I spoke up. "Okay, let's calm down. You're giving me a headache. There's one more turtle pouch left, and if you really want it, it's yours." After some time, Tommy finally calmed down and repeated his request for the turtle pouch. We agreed to meet later at a cafe. On the appointed day, I brought the last red turtle pouch in an envelope to our meeting spot. Tony and his wife were already there and immediately demanded the money before I even had a chance to sit down. As I quietly took out the red turtle pouch, Tony grabbed it immediately and unzipped its shell. But inside wasn't a check, it was a small electronic device. "What's this?" Tommy asked, puzzled as he examined the device. He found a button and pressed it, and a voice recording started playing. Alice, who was standing next to Tommy, went pale as she heard her own voice talking affectionately with another man, someone who clearly wasn't Tommy. Confused and shocked, Alice tried to snatch the recording from Tommy's hand, but he held onto it tightly. As they struggled, I opened the envelope I had brought and laid out several photos on the table. Pictures of Alice having an affair with another man in their home. Confronted with undeniable evidence, Alice became flustered and kept asking why. Tommy picked up each photo, studying them carefully. "Ever since I came to your house, something didn't feel right. A friend suggested I hire someone to investigate, and they even offered to cover the costs. What's wrong with you? Why would you do this?" Alice demanded. "You're my son's wife. It's heartbreaking to think that family would deceive each other. You'll understand when you're older. I suppose fate brought me here to uncover your infidelity." "Have you been lying to me all this time? Since when, Tommy?" Tommy remained silent, and now it was Alice's turn to speak. "And what about you wasting all our money on gambling? I only spend what I earn, and you have your part-time jobs, so you should have some money saved up too." Listening to their argument, it became clear that this couple had been keeping their financial struggles hidden until now. Neither of them had any money left. "Alice, you were $40,000 in debt. You've been giving all your earnings to your affair partner. I had the investigator check your finances." Both Tony and Alice were shocked, and they started shouting at each other. I was stunned when I heard the results of the investigation. This couple was on the verge of bankruptcy. "Look, if we get Mom's money, we can pay back the debt. So give it to us now." I donated all the money. The only thing left is this red turtle figurine. He wasted my savings on gambling. "What? You're kidding me." All of it. In a fit of anger, Tony lunged at me across the table. Other customers started to pay attention, and the staff rushed over. "The $1 million is mine. It was supposed to be mine. Give it back." Tony's rage escalated to the point where the police had to be called to restrain him. After some intervention from the officers, they kindly escorted me back to my hotel due to concerns about Tony's aggressive behavior. A week later, Tony and Alice's relationship had completely broken down due to the affair and financial troubles. They ended up getting divorced. Tommy, now single, became even more engrossed in gambling, accumulating more debt. He was caught attempting to embezzle company funds, which led to him being fired. His outburst at the cafe was captured on video and spread on social media, making it hard for him to find another job. Unable to bear the shame, Tony cut off all contact and disappeared. After the divorce, Alice had nobody to turn to and moved into a rundown public housing unit, living alone. Just as I was about to make a donation for turtle rescue, an online post I made joking about my own turtle went viral. Alice began facing harassment and stalking, which eventually affected her part-time job and resulted in her being fired. Even the man she was having an affair with grew tired of her and left. Now, with no source of income, she relies on temporary assistance for needy families to survive. After returning to my home in France and finishing unpacking in my apartment, I changed into a dress with ease. As I reviewed some work documents, I heard a noise at the entrance. It seemed Joe, my roommate, had returned home. "Hey, Madam President, welcome back. How was your trip to America?" Joe greeted me with a smile as he set down his coat and bags. Joe is 75 years old and was a resident in the same apartment complex where my son Tommy and I lived years ago. During that difficult time, I was struggling with poverty after losing my husband and caring for a young Tommy who had asthma. We had no utilities, and with no one to turn to, I felt desperate and considered giving up. It was Joe and his wife, our upstairs neighbors, who saved us. They became our lifelines. Please call me Sarah. I'm back, and look, I brought back many souvenirs. Wow, all my favorites. Thanks. I'll take some to the storytelling event at the community center tomorrow. Joe examined each of the souvenirs piled up on the table, his face glowing with happiness. After we had gotten back on our feet, Joe and his wife moved away for work. Years later, we ran into each other in the city, and I started helping with a support program for the needy that Joe had founded. By then, Joe's wife had passed away, and we became business and life partners. I've been leading the organization since Joe retired a few years ago. What began as a small initiative between Joe and myself has blossomed into a large-scale international organization over the past 30 years. Currently, our main focus is on supporting single mothers and their children. A few years back, we relocated to France to study their advanced support systems. Although we've gained recognition in France, we're still relatively unknown in America. I'm planning to expand our activities there soon and wanted to spend some quality time with Tony and his family before they found out about my work. In the end, I couldn't make them understand how I felt, but that's their decision to make. Even if it was only for a brief moment, I was grateful to have had the opportunity to spend time together as a family. Now at the age of 70, I refuse to let my age define me. There's still so much I want and need to accomplish. As I straightened my back in my dress, I began to ponder the content of my upcoming international speech for tomorrow. Everyone was really excited as my daughter Marissa's wedding rehearsal dinner got going. I felt proud watching her and her fiancé Kevin, surrounded by our family and friends, getting lots of good wishes. But then something unexpected happened. Marissa spoke up, asking for everyone's attention. The room went quiet. My husband Ron and I looked at each other, confused. Marissa raised her glass. "I want to talk about something important," she said, looking right at me. "Elise, you might think of yourself as my stepmother, but to me, you're just someone I don't want in my life." The guests were shocked, and Ron looked really pale. I felt like I'd been hit hard, like all the air had been knocked out of me by what Marissa said. "What's going on, Marissa?" Ron asked, sounding shaky and shocked. "Don't act like you don't know, Dad," Marissa said with a sneer. "You know that Elise has been trying to become a part of our family since the beginning. Well, I'm done pretending she's not my mom because she never will be." Her words felt like a sharp knife stabbing into me. I looked at Marissa, hoping to see the loving girl I once knew, but all I saw was hatred. "Marissa, please, let's not do this now," I begged, my voice shaking with emotion. "Why not?" she snapped back. "This is my day, and I'll say whatever I want." Ron clenched his fists, trying to stay calm. "That's enough," he said firmly. "We're leaving." Marissa just smirked and turned away, leaving me to face the stares and whispers from the guests. As we walked out, I could feel their judgmental eyes on me, wondering what I'd done to make my own stepdaughter hate me so much. Tears streamed down my face, and I realized everything had changed. In the car, Ron held the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white, his face filled with anger and sadness. "I don't understand what's wrong with her, Elise," he said, his voice strained. "But I won't let her hurt you like this." I just nodded, feeling overwhelmed as we drove away from what should have been a happy night, now ruined. I wondered what had happened to the sweet girl Marissa used to be and what this meant for our family. It's hard to say when Marissa started hating me. Maybe it was when I married her dad and became her stepmom. Or maybe it started even earlier, influenced by her mom, Clara. "Don't worry, honey," Clara had told Marissa, running her fingers through her hair. "No one can take your real mom's place." Even then, Clara's words made me feel uneasy, but I tried to ignore it. I wanted to build a good relationship with Marissa, my new stepdaughter. "I'm not here to take anyone's place," I told Marissa gently. "I just want us to be friends." She nodded, but her eyes showed no warmth or love. It felt like there was a barrier between us, fueled by her mom's hurtful words. At first, Marissa was polite, but distant. But as time went on, her true feelings came out. "Why are you always trying to get involved in my life?" she snapped one evening when I asked about her weekend plans. Ron gave Marissa a disapproving look. "Marissa, don't talk to your mom like that." "She's not my mom," Marissa yelled, her face full of anger. "And I'm tired of her pretending she is." Then she stormed off, leaving me hurt by her harsh words. Ron could only shake his head, looking disappointed and resigned. After that, Marissa's dislike for me was obvious. She'd roll her eyes when I came into a room and make mean comments quietly. If I offered help, she'd reject it rudely, like she couldn't stand being around me. "You're not fooling anyone with your fake kindness," she sneered one day when I asked if she wanted a ride to her friend's house. "Marissa, stop it," Ron said, getting frustrated. But she didn't listen. It was clear Clara encouraged Marissa's hatred toward me. Whenever we saw her, she'd smile sweetly, like she was happy we didn't get along. "I don't know what you've done to make my daughter hate you," she'd say with a fake smile, her eyes filled with mean intentions. "But I guess you'll have to deal with the consequences." And deal with them I did. Marissa's hatred kept growing, like a wound that wouldn't heal, making our family life miserable every day. But I didn't realize then that her hurtful behavior was just the beginning of something much worse. Marissa became even more manipulative and mean after she quit college. Without a plan for her future, she seemed determined to cause trouble in our lives, using her anger to get money and create chaos in our family. "Give me $5,000, or I'll tell everyone how terrible you've been as a stepmom," she said one day, trapping me in the kitchen. I was shocked. "Marissa, why are you saying this? I've tried my best to be good to you." "Forget it," she snapped. "Just give me the money, and I'll leave you alone." I felt desperate as I realized how low she was willing to go. "I don't have that much money right now." "Then you better find it unless you want everyone to know how bad you are." After that, it happened often. Marissa kept asking for more money, and her threats got worse each time I said no. Ron was stuck in the middle, trying to make both of us happy and wondering why his daughter was acting like this. "Please just give her what she wants," he pleaded with me one night after another big fight. "I can't handle all this arguing." But I knew that giving in would only make things worse. So even as Marissa's threats got scarier, I stuck to my decision. "You think you're so perfect with your job at the high school," she sneered. "Just wait until everyone sees who you really are." Her words scared me. I could only imagine the terrible lies she might spread, ruining my reputation with my coworkers and the students I cared for. Through everything, Clara was always there, silently supporting her daughter's mean actions. "You get what you give, Elise," she'd say when she visited, making me feel even worse. "Maybe if you were a better stepmom, Marissa wouldn't act like this." Her words hurt so much, making me feel angry, betrayed, and lost. But in the middle of all this chaos, I started to feel determined. I couldn't just sit back and let Marissa and Clara keep hurting us. If Marissa wanted a fight, she'd get one. It was time to stand up for myself and my family. I needed to show everyone the truth about Marissa's cruelty, even if it meant doing things I never thought I could do. From then on, I promised myself I'd do whatever it took to keep my family safe, even if it meant doing things I never thought I'd have to do. As Marissa's wedding day got closer, she kept asking for more and treating me worse. It felt like she enjoyed making me suffer, testing how much I could take before I broke down. "I need $3,000 more for my dress alterations," she said one evening, not even saying hello as she came into the living room. Ron looked at me, begging me to give in, but I couldn't take it anymore. "No, Marissa, I've had enough." She acted surprised. "What are you going to do, Elise? Cry to Daddy like you always do." I clenched my fists, feeling furious. "You ungrateful child. Your dad and I have done everything for you, and this is how you treat us." Marissa laughed, making me even angrier. "You're not fooling anyone. You're just a sad, insecure woman trying to buy your way into our family." Her words hurt, but before I could say anything, she said one more thing. "You think the school wants someone like you?" Marissa said, her voice dripping with malice. "Just wait until they find out about your drinking problem." I felt sick to my stomach. Marissa was planning to ruin my career and reputation with lies. "Marissa, stop it," Ron yelled, furious, but she just smirked, enjoying the mess she'd made. In that moment, something changed in me. I felt determined to stay strong against all the hurt and anger. "I'm done being a victim," I said, my voice firm and steady. "Leave and don't come back until you can act like a decent person." Marissa looked surprised by my defiance at first, but then she smirked and leaned in close. "You'll regret this," she whispered, her breath hot on my face. With those words, she stormed out, leaving a tense silence behind her. Ron looked at me, seeming lost. "I'm sorry, Elise. I don't know what's wrong with her," he said, rubbing his temples. But I knew this wasn't sudden. It was years of Clara's influence. As I thought about Marissa's threats, I felt determined. She thought she could ruin my life with lies, but she was wrong. If she wanted a fight, she'd get one, and I wouldn't play by her rules. Marissa's threats kept replaying in my head, making me more determined to expose her true self before it was too late. I knew I couldn't rely on Ron for help. His love for his daughter made him blind to her cruelty. So I had to handle this on my own. That's when Derek came into the picture. He used to be Marissa's boyfriend before she changed. We ran into each other at the grocery store, and we started talking. Soon, everything started to make sense. "She's not who you think she is," Derek told me, looking regretful. "She lied to me about you and Ron." I felt really scared when he told me about all the bad things Marissa did. He said Marissa made up stories about me, saying I was trying to control their family and that Ron was mean to them. He believed her because she seemed so sure and angry. But he only realized she was lying after we broke up. As he talked, I started to see how sneaky Marissa really was. She made up lots of lies to make everyone think badly of me. Her mom, Clara, was the one behind it all. Like she was controlling everything behind the scenes. Derek told me that Marissa's mom has been poisoning Marissa's thoughts about you from the very beginning. I realized, feeling sick to my stomach. She's been putting all these twisted ideas in her head, like you were trying to replace her mom. Everything suddenly made sense. I had been the target of their mean plan all along, made out to be the bad person in their story. But Derek didn't stop there. He said Marissa's getting married for the wrong reasons. Not because she loves Kevin, but because she wants his money and status. Marissa doesn't really care about Kevin, Derek said with a laugh. She's just using him to get what she wants. Once she's got what she needs, she'll leave him and find someone else to use. His words shook me to my core. I had always had a feeling that Marissa didn't truly care, but hearing it so plainly was hard to take. After Derek left, my head was spinning with everything he'd said. I'd been letting Marissa and her mom control everything for too long. But now, armed with the truth, I knew I had to do something. It was time to stand up to them, to show everyone what was really going on. No more pretending to be the victim, no more being scared of their lies. I was ready to fight back. On the day of Marissa's wedding, the air was tense as I watched her get ready. But I was determined. This was the day I would reveal the truth. "You look so pretty, my dear," Clara said sweetly, fixing Marissa's veil with a smile. Just like a princess on her big day. Marissa glowed with happiness, soaking up her mother's praise like a flower soaking up sunlight. But it made me feel uneasy. "Yes, it's like a fairy tale," I remarked, unable to hold back, with a handsome prince and a mean stepmother. Clara's eyes narrowed. But Marissa just laughed, not seeming to understand or care about what I meant. "Speaking of mean stepmothers," she said calmly, "I'm surprised you came at all. After how you've been treating me, I thought you might skip the whole thing." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, believe me, I thought about it, but I couldn't miss this moment." Before Marissa could say anything, Ron popped his head into the room with a forced smile. "Everything okay here?" he asked. "Just fine, Dad," Marissa replied sweetly. "Elias and I were just chatting." Her tone dripped with sarcasm, but Ron ignored it. "Well, it's almost time. You ready?" Marissa nodded eagerly, ready to make her entrance. As the music started and the doors opened, I took a deep breath, getting ready for what I had to do. The ceremony went by quickly, with vows that felt empty and fake. But when it came time for Kevin and Marissa to kiss, I knew I had to speak up. "Wait," I shouted, my voice echoing in the quiet chapel. "This wedding can't happen." Everyone gasped and looked at me. Marissa's face turned red with anger, her fists clenched. "What's going on?" she spat, furious. I took a deep breath and stared at Marissa firmly. "Marissa, what this means is that I can't stay quiet anymore while you keep lying and manipulating everyone around you." Clara looked pale, realizing what was happening, but I continued before she could interrupt. I showed them all the proof Derek had given me, texts, emails, recordings, that showed Marissa's lies. "For years, you've been spreading lies and turning people against me, pretending to be the innocent one," I said firmly. "But not anymore. It's time for the truth." I showed everyone the evidence, explaining how Marissa had been deceitful and selfish. The chapel fell silent. Marissa's calm facade cracked, and she looked furious and shocked. You're lying," she yelled, reaching out towards me. "How dare you ruin my special day?" But it was too late. The truth was out for everyone to see. As Kevin's family reacted with shock and dismay, it was clear that Marissa's deceit was unraveling before everyone's eyes. She stood exposed, no longer able to maintain her facade. Despite her past actions, I couldn't help but feel a mix of pity and satisfaction seeing her downfall. The truth had been revealed, and I had won not through trickery, but by exposing the darkness hidden beneath Marissa's lies. The aftermath was chaotic, like a bomb had gone off in the room. The silence was quickly replaced by shouts and gasps as people reacted to the truth. "How could you, Marissa?" Someone yelled, their anger palpable. "This was supposed to be my special day." "Your special day was built on lies," I retorted firmly. "You can't deceive people forever." Marissa looked ready to argue, but Kevin stepped forward, his eyes filled with hurt and disbelief. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Were you just using me?" For a moment, there was silence as everyone waited for Marissa's response. I almost felt a twinge of sympathy for her. Almost, but then she put on that fake smile and I saw the cold, calculating look in her eyes. "No, of course not, darling," she said, reaching out to touch Kevin's face. "You know I love you so much. Elise is just trying to cause trouble like she always does." I clenched my fists, trying to control my anger. Didn't she realize that her lies were exposed? Apparently not, as she turned her angry gaze back to me. "This is all your fault," she snapped, pointing accusingly at me. "If you hadn't interfered, none of this would be happening." "Stop," Ron's voice boomed, cutting through the tension. We all turned to see him, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "I can't believe what I'm hearing," he said, shaking his head. "My own daughter lying and manipulating everyone for her own selfish reasons." Marissa was silent, unable to respond. For once, she seemed speechless in the face of her father's disappointment. "I don't even recognize you anymore," Ron said, his voice heavy with sadness. "The girl I raised, the one who was kind and loving, she's gone, isn't she?" A heavy silence filled the room as we all absorbed the weight of Ron's words. It wasn't just Marissa who felt the impact, but Clara too. They exchanged a tense look, a silent struggle passing between them. Finally, Clara broke the silence. "Well?" she demanded, her eyes fixed on her daughter. "Aren't you going to speak up, defend yourself?" But Marissa stayed silent, defeated. She looked smaller than ever, a mere shadow of the manipulative person she had become. Clara snorted in disgust, then stormed out, leaving a shocked silence behind her. Kevin's family followed, their faces showing everything from pity to disgust. And just like that, it was all over. Marissa's big plan had fallen apart, leaving her dreams shattered. As Kevin left, looking devastated, I felt sorry for him. He was just another victim of Marissa's games, but any sympathy I had was quickly replaced by a sense of satisfaction. The truth was out, and Marissa had brought it all on herself. There would be no more lies or manipulation, only the consequences of her actions. In the days after the failed wedding, chaos erupted as news of Marissa's lies spread rapidly. She found herself shunned by the very community she'd once hoped to impress. I'll never forget the sight of her at her mother's door, begging for help after her plans fell apart. "Please, Mom," she cried, tears in her eyes. "I need your help. I have nowhere else to go." But Clara looked at her with a mix of disgust and pity. "Help you?" she scoffed. "After what you've done? After embarrassing our family?" Marissa flinched as if she had been slapped. But you're my mom. You're supposed to support me, no matter what." "Support you?" Clara shook her head sadly. "You don't understand, do you? There's no support left. You've pushed away everyone who cared about you with your selfishness and lies." Her words hit Marissa hard, like a punch to the gut. I could see the realization dawn on her face, the weight of her loneliness settling in. You don't mean that," Marissa whispered, her hand shaking as she reached out. But Clara stepped away, her face now cold and distant. "I don't recognize you anymore," she said firmly. "The daughter I knew wouldn't have done what you did. You made your choices, Marissa. Now you have to face the consequences." With those final words, Clara turned and walked back inside, leaving Marissa alone on the doorstep, utterly broken. In the weeks that followed, I saw Marissa's once proud demeanor crumble under the weight of her own actions. The places she used to frequent, fancy bars and high-end stores, now treated her with scorn, whispers following her wherever she went. Even her friends deserted her, not wanting to be linked with her disgrace. Through it all, Ron and I stayed strong, our bond growing stronger as Marissa's world fell apart. "I'm sorry it had to end like this," Ron said quietly one evening as we watched Marissa walk by, looking defeated. But you were right. She did this to herself. I didn't say anything, just squeezed his hand gently. Words felt insufficient in the face of such a painful situation. As things settled down and our community began to recover from Marissa's lies, Ron and I received an outpouring of support and gratitude. The families we had helped, the students I had taught, they all came together to thank us for standing up against the manipulation and lies that had threatened to tear us apart. In those moments of connection, witnessing human kindness and resilience, I found a newfound peace and purpose that I had been missing during Marissa's tumultuous reign. She tried to tear me down, but it was her own selfishness that led to her downfall, revealing the emptiness beneath her facade. Ram and I would move forward, stronger from the experience. If our story could encourage others to stand against manipulation and embrace honesty, then perhaps something positive could come from Marissa's downfall.